Welcome to the first MRC Biweekly Diversity Talks. My name is McIntosh, and I am the Vice President for Multicultural Affairs and the Student Association. This week, the session is entitled Lost in Silence: How Media Shapes Our Perceptions of Underrepresented Populations. Today, we have the MRC Director, Dr. Nicole Sirju-Johnson, as well as a wonderful team of student leaders.
Well, thank you so much, Isis, for agreeing to be our host today. And thank you to everyone for joining us for our first ever televised MRC Diversity Talk. My name is Nicole Sirju-Johnson. I am the director of the Multicultural Resource Center, and I'd like to welcome you and our panel of student leaders from our cultural groups.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gaddy. I'm here representing the Black Student Union.
Hi everyone, my name is Munira and I'm representing Multicultural Resource Center. I'm an interning there.
Hi, my name is Nafis Ahmed and I'm representing the Muslim Student Association.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Khan. I'm also representing the Muslim Student Association.
Hello everyone, I'm Yingxue Wang and I'm representing Chinese Students and Scholars Association today.
Hello everyone, my name is Kahil Stultz and I'm representing Amnesty International.
Let's take a look at this. Uzo Aduba plays a character called Crazy Legs on the popular HBO show Orange is the New Black. Julianne Hough is an actress on a popular show Safe Haven and the former dancer on the popular show Dancing with the Stars. Julianne showed up for a Halloween party dressed as the character Crazy Eyes. After receiving negative media attention, Julianne responded on Twitter, quote, "I am a huge fan of the show Orange is the New Black, actress Uzo Aduba, and the character she has created. It certainly was never my intention to be disrespectful or demeaning to anyone in any way. I realize my costume hurt and offended people, and I truly apologize," end quote. In the media, Julianne's blackface stirred up controversy and rubbed people the wrong way. We want to raise awareness to prevent issues like this from happening again. So we will show you some images and video clips and ask you to think critically as we discuss the underlying meanings. Take a look at this first clip. What is your immediate reaction when you see this?
Well, when I take a look at images such as this, I immediately have to say that it's not an indictment of Chinese Americans. It's not an indictment on any Asian American group. The sad fact is that American standing in terms of geopolitics has fallen in the last 10 years. And like it or not, we have to admit that China is becoming a greater power. Long before America and Britain, it was the French who were the world's preeminent power. Before them, everyone was speaking Latin. And in between these times, we saw that China was the most powerful country in the world. I think that if we truly want to see ourselves as being a colorblind society, we have to admit that at times a non-Western power will become the world's epicenter for growth.
Well, I have a different opinion from his. Is it a stereotype that everybody thought that Chinese people could read the future from a crystal ball? But I think that isn't true, because actually it's not from the history. It is from history, but nowadays people don't read the future from the crystal ball, even in China.
It's interesting that you saw it in a geopolitical sense, but I seem to see it in a more business sense, where America has been known worldwide to import a lot of goods from China, and she probably sees that most of the goods that are being imported are just from China, and the written language is slowly is translating into Chinese.
Does anybody else have any other thoughts on that particular piece? This was an interesting piece, Isis. I'll share with everyone. When we first looked at the piece, myself and Min-Chin Huang, who is the program coordinator for the MRC, she is also a Chinese, a native Chinese born. We had a discussion about exactly what we took immediately from the clip. For me, I also saw it in the business geopolitical sense in that not only are all of our goods imported, just about everything that we touch, see, feel is coming from the Far East, but just in terms of sheer dollars, the influence that China has on the rest of the world, the expectation is in the future that they will essentially take over the world market, completely dominate it, and the United States may not be the world power 20 plus years from now. The interesting piece about it is you can also look at this in a sense of it being a positive stereotype for Asians. In the sense that, oh, they're growing in terms of their influence in the world or on the world market. But for some Chinese Americans, it can really breed fear in terms of Americans being fearful of the unknown. And essentially, as the person says in the clip, you know, she cannot read Chinese. And there's typically, especially when we begin to stereotype, there is fear of what is unknown. And so that can also breed and encourage hatred and distance of another culture. So I think that's the important piece. One that Min-Chin immediately got, but of course I didn't see it that way. But it was important for us to have the discussion.
I think that it's definitely great that we can all come together and see these different views. I personally saw something completely different. I feel that we often, when we look at this image, we focus on what was being said, that I can't speak Chinese, so we often like gravitate to that word. But if we look, I feel that it's also pretty stereotypical for what America means, as well as who do we believe are fortune tellers. I feel that when you look, there's a white male dressed in the colors. So now are you saying that America is signified by a white male? And then you see the woman who's actually the fortune teller. Are you now saying like, oh, the fortune teller, well, in America isn't like the highest paying or accepted job. You see a person who seems to be of Middle Eastern descent, and you see a woman. So that kind of, I feel like we've accepted that, that is what America is, and that's who a fortune teller is. And we've just gravitated towards, okay, we're not really used to the Chinese culture being seen as American. So that's where we look.
Interesting.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to reply to what you said. I think it's very interesting that you saw it this way. And also I wanted to add that, so I took American education in a globalized society. And what we talked about is that America, like even nowadays, Americans are they're convinced that they're #1 in the world in education and everything, in market and everything else. But the reality shows that many years from now, you know, Asian countries, and it's not being said just China, but India, China, and like many other countries, they're going to surpass America in at least education. Like we can see a lot of differences now. And this picture, this particular cartoon, it showed me that. When America, I didn't see the stereotype between being like a white male, but what I saw is that when an American asks like a fortune teller about the future, the fortune teller tells him the truth that China has already surpassed. And I don't think she just meant China, she meant maybe other countries like China, India, and I don't know, Singapore. You know, that's just my opinion.
I'd just like to add to that too, in that the interesting thing about this piece is that I also, as Kahil said, saw Uncle Sam dressed in the American flag and colors. I saw it as what was indicative of this piece is the American subconscious, in that while we really want to think of ourselves globally as world leaders, there is a part of our subconscious that really questions that. The American subconscious questions just how much influence we are having on the world market moving forward. So that's the interesting piece that comes to mind in looking at this piece.
And I definitely agree with you guys. Now we're going to take a look at the next image. what do you think immediately? What's your first thought when you see this image above?
I thought it was very interesting because you kind of see both extremes. You see sort of on the left the Western world represented, and on the right you see the Middle East. And usually there's a perception here that women in the Middle East, in Islamic countries, are being oppressed because, they're being forced to cover up or whatever. But then you're also seeing the other side of it. You're seeing their perception of Americans over here, where they think that, oh, women over here are being forced to basically show themselves for men, and they think that's oppressive. So I thought it was very interesting. You don't get to see both sides of the argument.
I think this kind of reminds me why I feel that a lot of us around the world should actually get back to our roots. If you take a look at those two women, we could both say that, both of them are, people who are doing what they want in life. But when you take a look at the West, and we have ideas that really guide the way we've developed as a civilization, and you take a look at Islam in the Middle East and the Ummah and how that's developed as a civilization, there's certain different traits. When Islam first, arose in the 7th century, we saw that people were attracted to it because it wasn't like something like Zoroastrianism or Christianity. It was something that liberated you. They actually say in the Quran that you don't have to be, you don't have to be a monk. You don't have to be ashamed of yourself. Be happy, and be happy that you're living in a world where you can do good. And this is something which is extremely important to them. If you take a look at, the founding fathers' documents, like the Declaration of Independence, we take pride in the idea of individualism. But some way it's actually got, given way to that. If we have an idea of Islam today, it's something that's austere, it's something that's brutal, it's something that's backwards, even though for a long time the most advanced countries in the world were Islamic. If you take a look at the number system, those aren't Western numbers, those are Islamic characters, those are Arabic characters brought by the caliphs. If you take a look at the way we take pride as Americans, we take pride in the fact that we're individuals, and we're extremely opposed to ideologies that would say that we're not people who could self-determine our own destinies. So I think that at the end of the day, rather than criticizing other people, we should be looking to ourselves and saying, am I doing things because I want to conform to what a society says? Or am I doing things because I feel this makes me more of what I want to be, but not exactly what I see myself as myself?
No. Also, to add what Kahil says, I agree with him, but on a more lower level, not everybody understands the history of what he just explained. So just from the visual aspect, from being in America, we see that as a sign of, like everybody was saying on this panel, as a sign of oppression, as a sign of not letting them be their own individual or being who they are, but they don't understand the religion aspect of it or the cultural aspect of it, because everybody's culture is different. We as a Western culture believe in certain ideologies and certain ways of life. We believe showing your skin is a sign of beauty and a sign of artists, but to them, covering up is a sign of their beauty and a sign of their art, and to judge them for that is just not right.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a controversial topic, and what I just want to bring up examples of two countries, and I know a little bit, but so there's France, right, and they forbid people to from wearing hijab, right? So I thought, what I think on this is that this is restricting people's rights. But there's another situation. So I come from Tajikistan, and in my country, we had a civil war before, and it was a war between those who wanted the country to be Islamic and those who wanted for it to be democratic, right? So. Now it's democracy. We don't have to wear hijab or anything like that. It's not Islamic, although the majority are Muslims. So my thing is that there was a law not recently, but a while ago, that when you go to higher education, when you're in politics, anywhere, you cannot wear hijab, right? So they forbid people from doing that. Now it's hard for me to judge this point, because I think that if they allow people to wear hijab, then there might be a demonstration against, you know, it to be more Islamic. So it's very hard for me to take one or another side. But I definitely agree with what you guys said, that we cannot judge people based on what they're wearing and their lifestyle, because wearing hijab is a religion, it's a lifestyle, and we as people who are educated, we should accept that.
One of the most prevalent, most prevalent concept in this piece that came about for me that surprisingly wasn't mentioned yet was a concept of women being second-class citizens. In both sides, both opinions, which are generalizations, the common statement is, what a cruel male-dominated culture. And that understanding, what resonated most with me is that regardless of where you are and where you're from, women are dominated by, neither one of these women are exercising power of their own. They're operating from a place that has already been predetermined by male culture. So that's the important piece for me. So on one side, you have a Middle Eastern or Muslim woman that is completely covered, and there's liberation in her garment for her. And if sex didn't sell, she wouldn't have that perception. In other words, sex sells in Western countries, and so being naked is something that is more prevalent for our culture than it is for where she comes from. And she sees it as degrading to be exposed. Whereas the Western female is looking at a Middle Eastern or Muslim woman and looking at a religious aspect that was completely built by male dominance, and she sees liberation in being able to be exposed. Neither one of them have looked at each other and said, there is an opportunity for her to be, she's not operating in a space that she has constructed for herself. And I think that's the most interesting piece for me, in that being a woman and a woman of color, I would say that race aside, that it just further just legitimizes the sentiment that it is very, it is harder to be a woman than a man.
And I agree.
I mean, really quick, I'm glad that you brought up the fact that sex does sell, and it is true. I find that in the Western society, in fact, in major societies, it is spread throughout the world, where if a woman doesn't express her sexuality vividly, such that it appeals to another man, she wouldn't be accepted in mainstream culture. If a woman were to say oppose in wearing revealing clothing, that woman would be forsworn in the society, and it's a sad world to live in. But I find that the practice of the hijab liberates her, whereas she doesn't have to abide by those rules, where she can completely hide herself and just expose just minimally, and yet be able to express her sexuality in the fact that she is wearing a hijab and she is a woman.
Now, I do have something to say, only because I feel that when we're looking at these two pictures, I feel that sometimes we focus on, again, it being a male-dominated society. I've actually seen this before on Facebook, and some of the arguments that was going around is, what if I feel liberated in the way that I'm dressing? Whether it's sex sells or things like that, it makes us wonder, is it okay to fully separate from our history because the bikini was originally put out as sex sells, I want you to wear this, I want you to wear that? Or is it now okay that I'm just comfortable with my body, so I want to wear the bikini? And I think with this, it's no right or wrong answer. I feel that it's more so just looking inside yourself and feeling kind of calm with whichever decision that you make, but knowing that to each side there's a perspective, and that no one should feel persecuted because you may do things differently. Now we're going to take a look at the next image. Now, was there a different emotion stirred up when you seen this picture that may have been different from the images before? Or just how do you feel when you see this? We'll start with you. Andre?
I take this one because I'm a big football fan. Most specifically, I'm a Giants fan. So I understand the rivalry between the two teams. But what people don't understand is the term Redskin originated as a term of disrespect for the Native Americans. So when you call somebody a Redskin, it's to disrespect their face, the way they look. So it's almost equivalent to calling the New York Giants, what if you call the New York Giants the New York Black Faces? What would you think then? Would you think a sign of disrespect, or would you just leave it then because it's a popular name? The reason why it stays this name is because the owners and stuff is too stubborn to change it because they make $1 billion. If you don't know, the Washington Redskins is the #1 generating revenue team in the National Football League. They make over $3 billion a year. And because of that, it's because of their name Redskin. But they don't understand that the term Redskin, who with the first owners, what they knew was a sign of disrespect. Nowadays, they try to say we're praising the Native Americans. We're showing a sign of respect. But it's almost like I said, saying the blackheads, the black faces, what you call the New York Giants, the black faces, or even more specifically, the N-word. Would you say the New York? You wouldn't say that because you know it's not socially acceptable but because of their $1 billion, it is socially acceptable. So I think that we should make a stand and change that because it's not right.
My man over here completely hit it on the head. I'd just like to say that I think one of the biggest issues with this is that people seem to be mistaking tradition with anachronisms. Like if you go to if my grandfather, was able to come back from the dead right now, and you were to ask him about the different terms that he would have used, he would have called, if I asked him what's your race, he would say I'm a Negro. If I asked him, who lives in China, he'd say Orientals. And so those are things now that we would probably say, well, it's offensive, you can't use those words. But back in his day, while those words probably were a little demeaning, it was, gruff words that essentially were, very, how should I put this? They were supposed to be endearing. At the same time, they're supposed to be, a put off. So it was the type of thing that you wouldn't expect to be said in polite conversation, but at the same time, you would assume that this is something which you could just use for whatever you want to say. Nowadays, we can't really say that either in polite conversation or even in personal conversation, because redskin or anything like that is going to be used as a sort of racial and a sort of, how should I put this, ethnic indictment. You can't say colored, you can't say redneck, you can't say darky, you can't say Oriental or Mohammedan. Those are things which are going to be seen as backwards and also going to, paint you as being a backwards person.
I'd like how you correlated it with the tradition. And I find this picture to be a metaphor on how we stubbornly hold on to negatively affecting masses of the traditional sense, where we hold on to incorrect manners of living, incorrect manners of speaking, and yet we expect it to be accepted because it's only tradition and everyone accepts it as it is, and we don't accept the fact that it's harming others, and it's very insensitive.
I'd just like to put something on your minds to think of, not necessarily as a right or wrong, but this is often a piece of discussion, even post-cultural competency workshops that we do with both students and even staff. Where do you draw the line in terms of, and this is, again, I want you to just think about these ideas. I'm not offering a right or wrong answer here, in terms of what is something that is in fact a part of history, and how do we pick and choose, being that America is a melting pot. Every country on the globe does not have the same social issues that we do in the United States. So we deal with heightened concern in our society that other communities don't necessarily address. So when you see a symbol of the Redskins, and we understand as minorities what it would mean, I would understand what that would mean for a Native American. Someone in the dominant culture may not necessarily will not see it that way immediately, and they certainly, for every time that they have said it or found the skins to be endearing because that was their team, never thought of it in that way. So in what can we offer in place of it? It goes along the same lines of the Merry Christmas argument. You know, in a dominant Christian society, to say Merry Christmas is an acceptable term until you say Merry Christmas to someone who's Jewish, to Merry Christmas to someone who is Muslim, to Merry Christmas to someone who is not a Christian or identifies with any Christian religion. How do you, what would be how do you mitigate that when you're approached with that scenario? So that's just something I want you to think about, and we could most certainly dialogue about it out loud.
Okay. Well, first I'm going to address the image, and then as a Christian, I'm actually going to then address the Merry Christmas thing. When it comes to this image, personally, I feel that sometimes as a person of color, we don't always, when I say we, I'm speaking for myself because everyone has a different viewpoint. I feel that sometimes we do not internalize or see it from others' point of view. Now, I feel like if you were grown up in a household or had certain morals and values, or you just were educated and understood, well, let me see it from a different way, then you can start to understand different perspectives. Originally, when I was a freshman coming into college and I saw this image, I wasn't a football fan, so I didn't really know what the Redskins were until I received the background on it. And at the first moment, I'm like, wow, okay, that was quite some audacity. Like, yeah, they should change the name. But there's a difference between saying, yes, they should change the name, and back behind them and saying, let's do what we need to do to change it. Because if that was the case, the name still wouldn't be the same. I feel that if enough people backed around it and said, you know what, this is an argument and this is a team name that we won't support. We won't support their games. We won't do this. We won't do that. We won't allow them, like Andre said, to be making over $3 billion per year. No, I feel like we've become complacent with it because it is not our own culture. And like he said, if it was changed, if the New York Giants names originally was the New York Black Faces or something of that sort, it would have been changed a long time ago. Why? Because that would have been something that we would have fought for, we would have rallied behind no matter how much we love the sport. But I feel like sometimes we get comfortable and we say, well, you know what, that's a fight for another day. That's a fight for another day. But now on the Merry Christmas argument, I come from a family where Christmas is it's not a religion, excuse me, it is a religious holiday. So for me, the Western culture has made it something to earn money off of. Like with Santa and everything like that, it's become a way to make money. So personally, I feel that, for instance, if we have, let's say, Eid, and Eid Mubarak, when you say that to someone, they're not going to take offense to it. Why? Because they understand it is a religious holiday for the Muslim people, and they're going to move forward. I feel like because we've made Christmas a very commercialized time of the year, now people who want to raise their children believing in certain things like Santa Claus, then it's a problem. I feel that sometimes as Christians, certain things, I don't want to get into a religious argument of it, but I feel like sometimes as Christians, things are put off because it becomes a commercialized time. Not only Christmas, for me, a very important time of the year is also Resurrection Sunday. That has been turned to Easter. That's now with bunnies and egg hunting and things like that. So now we'll no longer walk up to people and say, Happy Resurrection Sunday. This is the reason. We'll now say Happy Easter. Why? Because we hope that we're not offending anyone. But when it's other religions, I feel that there's some type of pride to it, and we understand that. Like, we get a whole week off of school when it comes to Yom Kippur, and we understand Rosh Hashanah. But I feel like if it was a commercialized view to it, then it would just be accepted.
Interesting.
Now we're going to move on to the next image. Just take a moment, because I know this one does have a little bit more words to it. But really, after you get to the end, how do you feel when you see this? I'll start with Munira.
So when I saw this at first, okay, so now I looked at it again, and it reminded me of two scenarios. So the first one is obviously, like, it's clear, it's the white people there was like a civil war, and then they were taking, advantage, there was slavery, and we were over that, but now still this issue of African American discrimination still exists, and a lot of people just don't see it or choose not to see it. So that's my first. Now, second thing, if I didn't see this, the last sentence about the black and white history, I would have thought it's the government who takes advantage of people. There is and I'm not talking just about American government, but a lot of other countries that have their people suppressed. And what I see is that what the government tries to show to their people that they're doing something for their good. Maybe there's a new like Obamacare, maybe there's a new some kind of a policy, and the government tries to convince everyone this is for your own good. But once they sort of like take advantage, the money flows into their pockets, then they try to abuse that. And I feel like these are two different things that came to my mind. The first thing that popped up in my mind was the Civil War, the African American discrimination, but that's something that also has an effect on our entire society, that the government and people, and I can't really relate to one particular country, but I feel like that's what the cartoon shows to all of us.
Sarah?
Yeah, I agree with Munira. I think that it's basically showing, I mean, for instance, you could say like it's showing that Americans, for instance, or white Americans are not taking responsibility for the past injustices, because this country is built upon the labor of African slaves. And now when it comes to the future, you know, we say that we're more evolved than that we've moved on, and, you know, we would never do something like that again, but then we're not exactly taking responsibility for it either. Like, we say we're trying to create equal opportunity, but the reality is that they don't have like the same opportunities, that like African Americans don't have the same opportunities that perhaps white citizens would have. So
I just want to say something. So it's very it's interesting. I'm a human development major, so I observe a lot. And does anyone know there is a program, it's called What Would You Do? Or something like that. So they basically put you in a situation where you're, you don't know you're being recorded or anything, and you have to you just act as you are, you know? And it's funny because does morality leads does moral thinking leads to moral behavior? That's my question. So you might say one thing, you might say, oh, you know, there are racial issues, you know, I'm so against it, you know, I hate when people are being discriminatory towards others. But when it comes to action, you might be different. And I think this is the main problem, because no one wants to admit that. Everyone thinks that, you know, they're not being racial, they're not being discriminatory towards others. But once it comes to the actual situation, when they're faced with that, they might back off. So I just wanted to give an example of, so this program, What Would You Do? There was a time when there was a couple of a Hispanic couple, I guess, and they came to eat to a pizza place, and the actor who was supposed to play the person who sells that, he was very discriminatory towards them. He's like, why'd you come from the country? Like, why you don't even know English? You know, things like that. And so, you know, I was shocked. Like, I saw people would just sit there and listen to it, and they would just stand up and walk out. Yeah, of course there were people who would take their side, but you would be surprised, not so many. So that was something that I've been thinking about. You know, that do you really, you have to really think about it. You have to really, in your mind, you have to accept that before you actually say something. Because I can say one thing, but my action will speak differently. So that's also one like an issue.
Like a lot of my views when it comes to, you know, incorporating different cultures into one country comes from the former Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Trudeau. And one of the most important things that he did in his tenure was he kept the French-speaking and socioeconomically less well-off French, Quebec, French-speaking Canadians in Quebec from forming their own country. And what he did is he says that your culture is a part of the Canadian culture. And so I think that when I look at images like that, I kind of have to say that everything that he said is absolutely 100% true. The fact of the matter remains is that racism is a major issue that's still facing us. That being noted, as he said, I would like to think that one day we can get to what my vision is, or what we should be like. But I think that incrementally and every day we get better. I remember following what happened with the Trayvon Martin case. Obama, he was supposed to give a certain speech, and he said something that really stuck with me. He says that we're not a perfect union, but we're trying to become a more perfect union. And I think that's one thing we should always, never forget. We're never going to be rid of racism in our society. If we think that we'll ever get to the point where 100% of the population is not racist, is not prejudiced, is not biased, then we're living a fairy tale. What we can hope for is that these popular attitudes, they begin to die off. And we know that these popular attitudes, they were never ever prevalent among the majority of people. Of course, we see that there were certain sensibilities and certain ideas that people had. But if you only have to go look 40 years ago and see the people who were marching with Dr. Martin Luther King, there were Jews. You saw there were people who were Irish Catholic priests from New York. You saw people who were white from, the same places that my friend talked about. There were, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. So I don't like to denigrate entire groups of people saying, the white people, they're in the country, their position is because of this. Because I know, and I've grown up with people who are white and who are dirt poor, who know what it feels like to not know what you're going to eat tomorrow or next week, who know how it feels like to have an injury or to have parents who are sick and can't have the money to afford medicine and the ability to pay for it. And so I take the opinion that rather than seeing this as a racial issue, although maybe dealing with it, we have to keep in racial and cultural sensitivities and considerations, that this is most importantly an economic factor, and this is something that we should have to deal with as not only simply a community, but as a country.
Okay. I agree with parts of what you all were saying. Now, me, I'm African American, but when someone asks me my culture, I do not say African American. I say that I'm Black. So that also shows like the difference of what you feel a race is. Do you know what I mean? Like, for instance, if I go back, let's say 50 some odd year, not even 50, 100 years, my ancestors were still here. So I have internalized being Black as my culture. So I don't see it as, okay, Black, white, Asian. But when people look at me, regardless, that is something that we've come across. For instance, I'm also a human development major, and I took a human development class when I first came here. And one of my professors, he said, okay, describe the young man in the back. Not in the black. He said, describe the young man in the back. And he was a Black male with a cap, and that was the first thing people said. Oh, he's Black, and he has a cap, and he's sitting in the back. And he said, okay, why isn't, I didn't mean to sound like Dr. Seuss. He said, okay, so why is it that he was described that way? Why couldn't he just be, he's approximately 6 feet tall, he's sitting in the third row in the back? It's because we've internalized that, and not only that, we've taught our youth that growing up. Like when I was brought up, I feel that the most important thing to me at that point was knowing that I'm a Black young woman and I'm Christian, that I love the higher power that I love, you understand? But I feel that in order for us to move forward, we need to appreciate each and every culture for who and what they are, but also understand that the person as an individual and that we have things in common. For instance, like Kahil said, you know what, we're all American. Now, I actually don't agree with the melting pot so much. I like to think of it more as a salad bowl because I don't like the idea that you want my culture to die so that I can be a part of something else. And when you add fire to something, you're changing its properties. It's no longer, it can't go back to what it was before. The culture is different, the language is different, the things that you once held dear, that the songs that my ancestors had to sing. You know what I mean? So when I look, coming back to the image, when I look at the image and I see that after a certain amount of time have passed, you're now looking at people of color as you're beneath us. It takes me back to, it takes me back to a spoken word that was done by Stultz. And inside, something that really stuck with me, he said, we're not asking for handouts. We're asking for a level playing field. And I feel that's the big thing that we sometimes, we skip, we forget. I feel sometimes we look at people as an individual, on an individual basis slowly, and not from the different support factors that they come from. Right now, I'm taking Black child and adolescent development. And something that is being spoken about is how the family is being torn apart. You have the ACS services, Child Protective Services, pulling the children away from their parents. Now, sometimes certain things need to be done, but when you are taking people away from their parents in a way where they have no ground, and then after the parents continue to follow it up and do what it is that they need to do to get their living situation in order, you still have their child in foster care, where as lovely as it may seem, our children are better off, they're well off. No, it's so many orphanages and things that they go through even worse than when they were originally with a parent. You have a high % of African-American males being incarcerated. If you look solely at the Broome County area, it's a majority Caucasian area, but majority of the people who are in jail systems from Broome County are African-American. It's like, the ideal is we want to move forward to a colorblind society. But with dealing what we have with right now, we need to understand who we are, what we are, and how we can understand each other. And I feel like that is the big thing. Understanding, not telling you you need to be different in order to get on my level or to get on my page, but we need to see each other eye to eye, and not as I need you to help me up here, but also understand that it's impossible for a culture or a group to pull each and every person in that group up by their own bootstrap when they don't have the same support systems.
I just wanted to comment a bit on this particular piece. The interesting part of it for me was that in the cartoon, the characters, the piece does not highlight the concept of time. So when several of the students talked about it, you mentioned slavery when you talked about this piece, but the characters don't age at all. There's no indication that time has changed. In fact, it highlights that things have stayed the same, and so the characters are the same in the first piece than they are as they are in the last. The big concept that comes to mind for me is the idea of invisible privilege. That it's a privilege for a dominant group to be in a place of dominance in a country where the subservient group was always present, and in fact helped build the country. And so what we see by the end of the cartoon is this concept of, if I got here, so can you. Just to piggyback off what Isis has already said, it is impossible to do that without help. And so we don't see the institutionalization of racism throughout the cartoon, but essentially policies were put in place to continue to perpetuate the same idea of separation, of subservience and domination. And in doing that, in the majority group, we'll tend to think most often that, this is America, we are a melting pot, and we all have the same opportunities to a better life for ourselves, to the pursuit of, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And essentially, we are coming from a place of privilege in the dominant society to think that way, because we don't all start from the same place. When we are in a dominant society, we get to think that, or we're in a dominant group, we can think that we all have the same privileges, and I just did better than you did. But in fact, that's not true. You were at a disadvantage long before we even started. And that's the thing about invisible privilege that we can't always see. It is, however, a concept that we cover in the Building Bridges to Cultural Competency workshop that the Multicultural Resource Center puts on several times throughout the year. We do it 4 times annually for faculty and staff here. The current trainings that we will do this semester will be in April, and they are available on the University Training and Development website. And we have some trainings that are coming up for students. We invite you to check out those workshops too, especially if this sparks something in you as you're listening and watching the images, to spend some time really debriefing about the concepts that we're talking about and seeing.
At this point, this was I love the discussion that's going on here. We're going to move on to the first clip.
My name is Alexi Silva, and I'm Mexican. It's really interesting when I walk into a place and I speak Spanish, and so I tell them I'm Mexican, and they don't believe me. They always tell me, wow, really? I didn't know that a Hispanic person can be blonde or have green eyes. But I say, yeah, we can look like you too.
Research on cognitive models of information processing suggests that humans are hardwired to categorize objects, people, and so forth into groups. This process serves the important function of allowing the generalization of knowledge across every category and each of its group members, enhancing perceptions of target stimuli when specific information is lacking.
That's an abomination.
Homeless to Hollywood. I've never been homeless. I have no idea where they got that. They do that to us colored folks, you know. But no one's ever told Brad Pitt he was homeless to Hollywood.
I think that the worst and the most traumatizing stereotypes are the ones that are not necessarily expressed. It's just that this feeling that you get that you're not, you know, that someone or something wants you to feel inferior, and that you're not good enough.
Can I just ask you one question? You know what, ma'am? You have to wait. Okay?
What? No, a maid.
If you want the girl back alive, listen and do not talk. The drop will be made tonight, 11 p.m.
The amount will be $50 million.
$50 million? And who you think you kidnapped, Chelsea Clinton?
Detective James Carter loved his job just a little too much.
You destroyed half a city block.
That block was already messed up.
And you lost a lot of evidence.
Still got a little bit left.
But the job got a little too dangerous.
You have 29 minutes left.
I got everything under control.
I want to speak with my daughter. Han was about to get his daughter back and you screwed it up. I would like one of my people to help.
Now it's time to bring in the master.
Please tell me you speak English. Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
I don't want no partner, I don't need no partner, and I ain't gonna never have no partner. Did Kojak have a partner?
Yeah, the fat guy.
Did Columbo have a partner?
No. You put your own bag in the back. I'm not a sky cat.
Beach Boys.
Oh, hell no.
Don't you ever touch a black man's radio, boy.
Yeah.
They're two cops with nothing in common.
Do it again. Like this.
Except the case.
Hello. You have one more chance.
They can't walk away from.
Agent Carter is very passionate about finding your daughter.
Which one of y'all kicked me?
From New Line Cinema. The fastest hands in the East.
Wow.
Meet the biggest mouth in the West.
Just received a threat on the building. We ask you please exit the building. Do not panic. Did you hear what I just said? Get the hell out of here. It's a bomb in the building.
Jackie Chan.
I can't hold it anymore.
Just hang on, man. I'll be right back.
Chris Tucker.
FBI. Take a picture. It's okay. Wait a minute.
Rush Hour.
We can hang in my crib. I will show you my hood.
What the hell did you just say?
So after watching those video clips, I'd like for you to just compare the two and just things that stood out to you while watching them. We'll start with Yingxue.
From the first very short video, I see all different kinds of people, Western people, Asian people, and African people. It is really a good thing to see all these people in a same movie clip, and I see a positive attitude of different culture communicating together and saying acting their ways and showing all different kinds of movements, like Chinese Kung Fu and different Kung Fu there. So I think it's a really good thing to see them in a video.
I was just thinking about this girl who said that she was Mexican, she looked differently. I thought it was interesting because like you can agree or not, but we all have some kind of perception. So like when you say you're from Mongolia, you would have an image in your head. And if someone comes into you and looks completely different, you're like, no, you're not. You know, you have this perception in your head. And I don't know if it's a bad thing or if it's a good thing. One thing is to sort of have an image and accept that. Another thing is, you know, being completely surprised and making the other person feel uncomfortable. So that's my thought on it.
My opinion with stereotypes, looking at both the videos and all, is that not all stereotypes is bad in the way that I believe is how the individual perceives that and how they go about addressing that person, because certain stereotypes could be true. Black people allowed, certain black people are allowed. Black people like certain foods, or Asian Americans, they know Kung Fu well. Certain ones do. But at the same time, it's always in the individual's heart or how they perceive that person, or when they first approach that person, what do they first think of them? Or they the first thing gonna say, oh, do you like chicken? Or do you know, can you do a backflip? Or can you, whatever it is. So it's just always, to me, with stereotypes, is a really touchy situation, touchy thing, like especially with the thing of Halloween and how you could dress up as certain type of people. If you want to dress up as a Mexican, a lazy Mexican, or a drunk, or like a drunk Irish person, or somebody who's supposed to be thug or street or hood, like it just depends on the person's heart and their intent. And that's what I have to say about that.
Would you like to start us off? Honestly, I have mixed feelings on Rush Hour. Really, because it, you know, as Sarah said, it played so far into the stereotypes. It's an American film, and it was, in my opinion, created out of American stereotypes of races to the fullest. So, for example, aside from the common stereotypes, you know, the ones that would stand out that we've talked about, African Americans being loud, Chinese Americans, you know, being able to do martial arts upon request. Those are general stereotypes, but then there are the other underlying things that were so prevalent throughout the movie of just, for example, African Americans not being serious at work, in anything, being musical, being comical, being entertainers, and existing, you know, pretty much in their own stupidity, for a lack of a better word, for the entertainment of white America. That is a historical concept, perception, and paradigm that is prevalent in the movie. In addition to Westerners in general that would react a certain way when you come in contact with someone from a foreign country that you don't expect to speak English. You will talk louder because somehow they can't hear you. You would dictate everything because they don't understand, or you believe that they don't understand. And in fact, people from other nations that live here are bilingual. We aren't, as Americans, and that's a concern. So again, there are all of these things. When you look at Jackie Chan's character, he is the problem solver. He is serious, which is why we spend time to import, you know, folks from overseas to work in our industries because they're ahead of us. They're serious. Where we are as Americans, whether it's in the economy or in industry, we're not as serious or as able to problem solve as well as others. We expect that Asians will be good in math, whether they are or aren't. Those are the type of concepts that are extremely prevalent throughout the entire movie that I found quite irritating. However, the fact of the matter is that it's very hard to sit through any episode of Rush Hour, 1, 2, 3, and not laugh, because the chemistry between the two characters made for a hilarious mix. At the end of the day, I couldn't tell you, you know, with being annoyed that it wasn't funny. The other pieces of it that come up for me is, again, being in a place of privilege. The other film short clip where we have a Mexican woman, a Mexican-American, blonde hair, green eyes, you know, that was simply saying, I don't know what it's like to walk in her shoes, to be in a place where she can actually, she's in a position where she does not have to identify. she can pass, and we can make all kinds of assumptions about who she is. And to me, that is a place of privilege. For her, that would be a completely, she would call her experience a completely different thing. I don't have the privilege of being able to pass her anything. So you know, those concepts are what stood out for me as I look at the films. Yeah.
I think that Dr. Nicole Sirju-Johnson said it perfectly, especially with the rush hour. So since we didn't talk too much about the second clip, I'll just talk about it a little bit. We should never get so comfortable in stereotypes that it's okay. That doesn't make it right. For instance, after blackface was done, if we go back about 70 years when it was that era and that time was happening, you even had black people dress up and doing it and dancing and laughing and jiving. Did that make it okay? No, I don't think that that made it right just because it was an African American doing it. And I feel that also what was seen with Jennifer Lopez, where it was a maid. Why is it that we have certain stereotypes associating certain cultures with certain things? Just because we laugh about it doesn't mean that it's right. I may walk into a room, I may dance, I may step, and they may say, oh, who taught you that, your grandmother? Just because it was a joke, does that mean that it's okay? Does it mean that it sits well with me? And I will also say the chemistry between Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker was definitely a great thing, and so it was laughable. But it's so many things that happen, like for instance with the fire, when he had to get loud, it made it seem that, okay, black folk can't get any type of things done unless they're being loud, unless that's the only time they'll be known as taken serious. Now, if I laughed at it, and which I did, that doesn't mean that that stereotype is something that we would want to sit. I feel that sometimes coming from New York, we are privileged in coming in contact with so many different groups of people and so many different ethnicities and cultures, so we can laugh about that. But if we go far into the middle, the Midwest, or far down south, where they're not exposed, or certain counties specifically aren't exposed to all these different cultures, the film is the only thing they see. And no matter how much we say, no, that's not me, we have to realize what we're putting out there, we don't know who is going to see it. We know Rush Hour 1 through 3 got a lot of exposure. Now, if Chris Tucker was the only African American you've ever seen, is that how you're going to internalize this is what black people are going to be? Wow, you're not funny. Wow, you're reserved, you're different. You're not black, you're white on the inside. Why is it that we're internalizing race when culture should be what it is? And at this point, we thank you.
Well, that's all we have for today. I really want to thank Isis, our VPMA, for being our host, and all of our cultural student leaders, Andre, Munira, Nassif, Sarah, Nafis, I'm sorry, Sarah, and Shay, and Kahil for joining us today. And hopefully some of what we've said has resonated with some of our viewers. We're hoping that you will join us next time for our next diversity talk. Until then,
we actually have a few.
Happy Friday.
Yes, we actually, if you would like to interact with us, send in images if you've seen in the media. That's kind of like what we talked about today. And send it into mrc.interns@gmail.com, and you just may be chosen for a prize. Also, post any comments or suggestions about the show on the MRC Facebook page. And if you yourself would like to be a panelist, then contact Meng Chen. Wang, thank you so much. You're amazing, Meng Chen, who is the program director of the Multicultural Resource Center. And we will randomly choose 2 winners, so hopefully you're one of them. Thank you.